Wes wanted me to give you a ride on the sailboat. The best I can do today is to sit here and talk on the sailboat and share with you things I've been preparing. And sailing is fun. One day, Jesus was talking to a crowd of people, and he said to them, "You see these Pharisees over here?" He says, they possess great knowledge, and he said they're teaching about the Old Testament and the law, and he said you should do those things. He said the tragedy is they teach these things, but they don't do anything. He said their life doesn't give evidence of any of these teachings in their life, and in fact, they put a heavy burden on you. They don't do anything to make that easier. And he said, I think it's terrible. I think it's awful that all of this teaching and all of this knowledge, and you don't see any of it in their lives. You know, sometimes it's easier to know something than it is to do something. Last 10 years, 15 years of my life, I've been involved in academia. And one of the things that academia is criticized for is somehow knowledge without application. And sometimes that's deserved, sometimes it's not deserved. But you see, knowledge should compel us to do something else, so that knowledge in and of itself doesn't become a destiny. Sometimes we can see this in the inverse better than we can see it in what I'm talking about. I don't know if it was the end of December, the 1st of January, the Intelligence Committee of the U.S. Senate was called together. In fact, I think they were called back from their holiday break, and they were briefed on the COVID-19 virus that potentially was going to come to America and create a pandemic in such a way that it was going to interrupt literally every portion of our lives. They were briefed on that. I don't know if it was into December or 1st of January, but it was right along that time that they were given heads up that this might be a reality. Well, it turns out that maybe 3, 4, or 5 of them, both Democrats and Republicans, had family members within the next week or so sell all of their, what we would think of as travel-related stock, like in airlines and cruise ships and travel destinations. Now, of course, they said there was no connection, but I believe that somehow that knowledge, you see, compelled them or their family members to do something by virtue of the fact that they had knowledge. Now, that's against the law, but it shows you the principle. When I have knowledge of something, it should compel me to do something. One of the tragedies that I see in the church today is that we have this information glut. There is literally all of this information, all of this knowledge that we have that we virtually do nothing with. And not only that, but it's almost like we have come to believe that knowledge is a destiny in and of itself, like it's a place that you go to. Where are you going? I'm going to knowledge, like it's an end place. It's not an end place, it's a beginning place. You see, just possessing knowledge is not enough. It should compel us to act in our lives. Now, you and I live in a world where people love knowledge, appreciate knowledge, polish knowledge, work knowledge, get more knowledge, and yet somehow it doesn't affect their life as Christ intended. In fact, the reason that he was saying this about the Pharisees, in front of the Pharisees, was to say, don't just sit on this knowledge. And if there's anything I see in the church today, it is that we have made knowledge a destiny. Like having all of this information is enough. That as long as I can accumulate more, if I can go to another Bible study, watch another tape series, watch some more CDs, go to another conference, then somehow I'm better because I did that. Well, the truth of the matter is, knowledge is not a destiny. Knowledge should compel us to go somewhere else with that knowledge. And you know, I'm not thinking that Christ is concerned as much about how much knowledge that we have as he is about the fact that we take a few things and work those things constantly in our life in a very practical way. In fact, if knowledge is not used, it turns, I like to think that it turns bad on us. It gets old, it gets stale. it has a tendency to make us complacent. It makes us arrogant. It makes us judgmental. And most of all, it causes us to just sit there. You see, if getting knowledge is the objective, pretty soon I'm not doing anything except getting more knowledge. Well, Christ intended for us to take that knowledge and actually apply that knowledge to our life as He did. In other words, as you look at the life of Christ, you see somebody that was constantly in the process of living out the teachings that He just gave you. In other words, He doesn't just say it, He actually lives it out and lets the disciples watch that. Knowledge needs application. Knowledge needs practice. Now, I want to tell you a story. All of my life, I've been fascinated by sailing. There's something about the wind pushing something across the ocean to unknown destinies that's just fascinating to me, and humanity's done that since the beginning of time. I just like that, and so I've always been fascinated with sailboats. And one of the things that I was never able to do was I really never lived close enough to the ocean or had enough money to really afford a sailboat. But this last fall, one of the things that I did was I took sailing lessons. I took them at the Annapolis Sailing Academy. I think it's the best one in the world. And you spend part of a week up there, and you have a textbook, so you have classroom. You actually get out on the Chesapeake Bay there by Washington, D.C., and you practice sailing these concepts that you just learned in the classroom. And you do this. I mean, it's incredible. It's a wonderful thing. And then when you come home for a couple of weeks, you talk about the fact that you were in this class and the people that were in the class and what you did when you were out there. It's great. I love it. But you know, having knowledge doesn't mean that you can sail. This past Christmas, my wife had a great year in real estate, and she bought me this sailboat, this one right here. And you know, after I got this sailboat, I came down here to the marina where I have it slipped. I came down here and just sat on it for about a month. I didn't try to sail. I didn't put the sails up. And then one day Joy and I were talking, and she said, you know, you're gonna have to do it someday. Well, I was afraid, see? I was afraid to try it, to practice it. And you know, like, what if I run into something? Well, you do. You sure do. Or what if I don't know how to park it or slip it? You don't. You come in sideways, and it's embarrassing and it's humiliating. Everybody else in the marina here knows it's my first year. But you know, it's in the application of it that we learn. It's through the practice of it that we perfect it. See, that we get better at it. Strangely enough, in the process of actually applying knowledge, I spiritually mature. See, knowledge in and of itself doesn't spiritually mature me. It's when I apply it to my life. It's as I begin to work with it. It's as I begin to own it. And this is what happens. It isn't very long until I've actually developed faith from working that knowledge into my life. I have a lot more confidence now about sailing this boat than I did when I first started. And that comes from practicing this. Now, I'm not perfect yet. I'm not even the best out here. I'm not even in that category. But you see, I'm in the group that's out here all the time trying to do this. Jesus intended for you to take all that knowledge that you have as a believer and to begin to work it into your life. You see, interestingly enough, every teaching that Jesus gives us in the Sermon on the Mount ends at another person. See, at the end of every teaching is a person. When you say love other people as you love yourself, or turn the other cheek, all of that ends, you see, with me connected to the life of another person. That takes practice. You know, learning not to judge, it takes years. See, just quoting that scripture doesn't change me. I have to become conscious of applying that to my life. Saying good things about people that say bad things about me, that takes a lot of practice. But you know, here's what happens. On the other end of that, I begin to see the power of actually doing that. The power of actually doing that. And that is what we call faith. Then I begin to believe it. You see, without application, without perseverance, without working it, without trying it again and again and again, you never develop faith. It's just information that you have. And you know what? He didn't ask us to stuff our heads full of knowledge. He asked us to do the things that He did. You see, the things that He did. I was thinking about this week. And like most people, I have been disheartened at the fact that our nation has not only been stressed over COVID-19, and then on top of that, we have had great racial tension in our country. And I'm a child of the 60s, and so I remember those things. And I hate, after all of these years, that we find ourselves in this same place again. But I asked myself this one day. I said, is there a different kind of solution? Is there a different approach to this? And so I thought about it and prayed about it. And I asked myself one day, I said, how many social friends do I have that are people of color? How many? Because I know that Jesus chose to bring people into His life that were not like He was. I know that the Apostle Paul spent his entire ministry ministering to Greeks and to Romans, people that the Jews would have thought were somehow less than they. So you see, by that example, I have a responsibility to take that knowledge and apply it to my life. I want a different solution though. It's not enough just to protest. It's not enough. Everybody is against racism. So what is it that I can do as an individual? And I was thinking about this. How many social friends do I actually have that are people of color? Well, I went on Facebook and I looked at my Facebook. Out of the 1,000 or so people I have as friends, maybe 3 of them are people of color. I mean, how many people do I actually hang out with? Go to dinner with? I couldn't think of any. Maybe the solution is to look at this at a completely different level. Maybe there is no government solution. Maybe there is no social solution. Maybe it's people like us taking the knowledge of Jesus and applying it to our lives. I hear people talking about, we just got to love each other. Well, what does that mean in application? I decided I would look up in the phone book the minister in my community of color who was closest to me. And I didn't know him. I'd never met him. And I thought, I should know him. I should be his friend. I should socially be his friend. He's my colleague, but for whatever reason, I don't know him. I know the others, but I don't know him. And so I sat down and I decided to do something in the way of approaching it from a completely different angle. And so I decided I would write this letter. And this is what it says. It says, Dear Pastor Johnson, I've been a pastor in Salem for 20 years. We've never met. I visited your church one time several years ago at the dedication, but that's the only time I've been there. However, I am sad today that our nation still struggles with the issue of race. I cannot say I know how people of color feel when they watch someone on the street literally being strangled to death just because. I don't know how that feels to watch that. I can say that it breaks my heart and it grieves me on many different levels to know that I've done nothing to make this better. Thinking about this, I examined my own life and said, what is it that I could do socially? Casual friendships to somehow make a connection to people of color on the same level as I see myself. I don't have all the solutions, but I know this. I have no one of color in my life that I laugh with, that I hang out with, that I just joke around with. There's no one like that in my life of color. I don't know that I have the solution to every problem, but this is what I suggest. Unlike other preachers, I don't play golf, but I have a passion for sailing. I have a passion for sailing. And I have a 32-foot sailboat at Smith Mountain Lake. It seems to me this would be a great place for us to start in some kind of casual relationship and friendship. I would like to suggest that your wife and family join my wife and me some afternoon this summer sailing. I know this is out of left field and maybe somewhat off the wall. Perhaps we could meet first for coffee, but I just see a need for us to socially, as friends, make a connection to other people. I'm looking for ways to take this knowledge that I have when I say I love other people as I love myself and put it into my life. I don't have political solutions, but I'd like to try this. I would like for you to look at your own life and say, practically, what is it that I could do to take the teachings of Jesus and work them into my life? Take that knowledge and apply it. God bless you. Come go sailing with me.